What we first need to do is to make sure that the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine ends well. And it must end in a way which does not reward Russia, because we know that if Russia is rewarded, then it will lead to more aggression in the future, not only in Ukraine but also in the rest of Europe. Of course, what we see is that the United States is shifting its focus more towards Asia, which means that European countries need to do more themselves for our own security. But what we first need to do is to make sure that the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine ends well. And it must end in a way which does not reward Russia, because we know that if Russia is rewarded, then it will lead to more aggression in the future, not only in Ukraine but also in the rest of Europe. So what we should do in the short term is make sure that we keep supporting Ukraine, that they will hold the line and they will have a stronger position at the negotiation table. And second, we need to create peace through strength, which means that we need to create robust security guarantees in Ukraine so that Russia is not able to regroup itself and to prepare for future aggression in Ukraine. That's only about Ukraine. And besides that, we need to make sure that we invest more in our own defense to make sure that our defense and deterrence is strong enough along the entire border with Russia.
So in terms of the peace talks that are now underway, what kind of preconditions do you see being imposed on Russia? Because the kind of language that we are hearing seems to suggest that there is going to be some significant concessions that will have to be made from all sides, but particularly on the Ukrainian side, it seems at the moment. How comfortable is Europe at this point with the way negotiations are proceeding and with the way the engagement is being taken forward? And what is the role for Europe there as those conversations proceed? Because you mentioned that, look, from a European perspective, there are certain things that perhaps are non-negotiable. But are you in a position to influence them significantly at this juncture?
At this point, we are able to influence because, of course, we are talking to the United States. We are also talking to Ukraine. But we need to make sure that we get our act together as Europe. That's why we are working hard to come up with a proposal on how a military engagement by European countries could look like. I think it's very important that we do this homework and that we do this homework quickly, because otherwise we know we will not have a seat at the table. But we are now working on this, and I think we are making progress on this. But it's not only about the military planning, it's also about, if there is a military presence in Ukraine, what is the task going to be? What is the mandate of this military force? What is this force going to do when Russia is violating any ceasefire, any peace agreement? Those are all political questions that also need to be sorted out quickly. And if we do that, and if we can come up with a strong European proposal, I think we will have a stronger seat at the table. Because it is about, as you said, it is about the security of Ukraine. So Ukraine should have a strong position at the table first and foremost, but it's also about security in Europe. So we need to make sure that Europe has a strong position at the table as well.
So beyond Europe, ultimately, in some ways, many would argue that the Ukraine war was also about the European security architecture, and what kind of an architecture perhaps can be conceived of, given that on both sides, from Russian side as well as from European side, there are strong demands on that architecture. So when you assess that architecture today, and when you are looking at the next, say, a few years, what are the fundamental parameters you want to embed in that architecture, given that now, of course, for many countries in Europe, Russia is the biggest threat and the challenge that they perhaps had not thought of, say, a few years back?
I think what's fundamental is that we keep our defense and deterrence in order. So any Russian demands on troops pulling back from former Soviet states is unacceptable, because we in NATO and we in the EU, we decide on our own defense. It's not that an outside power can decide how many troops are positioned in Europe or in any European countries. So that's one. Second is, as I said, we need to do more as European countries ourselves, so we need to invest more. There are also some strategic capabilities in which we are fully dependent on the United States. What we need to do is create a common roadmap with them, so that we can also show over time how we are taking over some of the responsibilities, so the United States can put their attention and some of their strategic resources elsewhere. Third, there are some fundamental principles at stake. So the fundamental principle of territorial integrity and the principle of sovereignty, those are also important. So we cannot go back to the 19th century that big powers are deciding whether a country can become member of the EU, for example, can become member of NATO. Those fundamental principles are at stake as well and are also having a big influence on our security architecture. I think those are the three main elements.